Well, welcome back to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, and part of our job is to let you know what's happening in the news. I think the other part that's equally as critical is to put a perspective on it so we know why things are happening, the way that they are occurring, and where we may be going from there. And one of the guys that we like to have on that tells us certainly from his perspective that can enlighten us as to what's happening in the Middle East is David Rubin. He's a political expert on U.S.-Israeli relations, a former mayor of the Israeli settlement of Shiloh. He's also written several books. His newest book is called Peace for Peace, Israel in the New Middle East, and his previous book is The Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America, I should say, in the age of Obama. And he is with us today. Mr. Rubin, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Good to be with you.
I want to get the perspective of what we're seeing here and perhaps how you are viewing it as a person who's been right in the Middle Eastern focus of so many volatile situations. Here we have an Islamist president who's been there for a year, and all of a sudden, in its simplest forms, the public says, enough, we want to get rid of you. Now, I know that's really, really simplifying it a lot, but let me just ask you, did this come as a surprise to you to see the populace come with such force a year later?
Well, perhaps to the extent that it happened, yes, but the trends were there. Basically, what we had is a situation where a Muslim Brotherhood leader was elected president after a year of protests. And, well, actually, it was more than a year of protests. It was about a year and a half of since the Arab Spring broke out in the center of Cairo, Egypt. And the people were shouting that they want freedom, they want freedom, but I don't think they really understood what they meant by that. What it turned out that they meant was just that they wanted free elections. As a result of those free elections, Mohammed Morsi of the Islamic fundamentalist Muslim Brotherhood was elected. After about a year in office, people started to realize that what he had been concentrating on during that year in office, rather than dealing with an economy that was in total shambles after a year of rioting in the streets and just total decimation of the Egyptian tourism industry, and even before that, the economy wasn't in great shape, but this really did the job to it. So Morsi, instead of concentrating on healing the economy, giving people jobs, helping them to put food on the table, he focused on consolidating his power, strengthening the power grab of the Muslim Brotherhood, and just trying to push his people into the military leadership, pushing his people into the leadership of the media, trying to do everything he can to strengthen the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic fundamentalism. But that during that 1 year of office, it turned out to be a big mistake, because what he should have been doing is trying to heal the economy in Egypt, trying to get people back to work, trying to help people to provide a basic income for their families. Because he didn't deal with those issues, he lost a lot of his support.
Well, I want to give an update right now. Even as of this morning, when we first started the morning show, 40 people had been killed in Egypt, and then we heard, I think, 48. Now 51 have been killed in Egypt just within the last day or so because of the uprisings going on there. The Islamists calling for an uprising right now. So let me ask you this. I think those of us on the outside, and I'm talking about really the rest of the world outside of the Middle East, looked at this saying, well, maybe this is an ideological shift of the populace in Egypt who said, we don't want what we think the Muslim Brotherhood represents. But you're saying it really comes down to the economy, stupid, almost like what Bill Clinton had said in during his election. Was this a not so much a Muslim Brotherhood belief, but an issue of the economy that caused this uprising?
Well, not only. It's a combination of factors. We have to remember that there's a very substantial minority of Christians in Egypt who have been persecuted in the past year. So right there you have a block of people that every single one of them is against Morsi and against the Muslim Brotherhood. They fear them terribly because of the persecution of the Christians in Egypt. So that's right there, one block of people. Then you have those who, for lack of a better word, could be called liberals, the liberal secularists, who are obviously against this Islamic fundamentalism of the Muslim Brotherhood, and so they make up perhaps 15 to 20% of the population. So already we're talking about some 30% of hardcore anti-Muslim Brotherhood people. So if you add to that another 20% of people who generally identify with Islamic fundamentalism, but for them the priority is to put food on the table, so then Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood lose a lot of their support, and it's kind of tipped the scales. So people who would have supported him in the past were not supporting him now, I would say. So in summing up, so ideologically, you have those who are strongly ideological, who wanted to get the Muslim Brotherhood out because they can't stand Islamic fundamentalism, or they fear Islamic fundamentalism, and they're definitely less than half the population. But because you have a lot of Islamic fundamentalist sympathizers, for whom the economy is more important, so that tipped the scales, and that's why this ended up happening. I have to also add on that the military, which is mostly former supporters of Hosni Mubarak, who was the dictator who had created a stable Egypt for about 30 years, but was thrown out in the past Islamic Revolution 2 years ago. So the military has long been a supporter of Mubarak, and they were just waiting in the wings for the right opportunity to go in and have a military coup. Well, so all of those factors combined to enable the overthrow of Morsi.
Initially it looks as if there was a general uprising from the people. Don't know if the military is behind it. There's no indication that they were really the impetus behind it. But they're the ones who did the protesting. Military ends up coming around supporting the people. Now you have the Muslim Brotherhood. It looks like it's shifted slightly, the Muslim Brotherhood against the military. Are those the two factions that we can expect to see in this conflict? Or could there be 3 or 4 more options of people coming into play in this conflict?
Well, what we're seeing right now is a backlash from the Islamic fundamentalists, the Muslim Brotherhood and their supporters and their allies, who are very upset about the military takeover of what was, after all, as terrible as the government was, and as ideological and anti-freedom they were. They did, after all, get elected freely and free elections. So they're very angry right now, and you're going to see an increase in the demonstrations from the Islamic fundamentalists against the military takeover. What all the other people are going to do while this goes on, that remains to be seen. I think some of them are going to run for cover, but we may be coming to, unless the military can get a handle on this, we may be coming to a civil war before too long.
Do you see the military as the wild card in all of this? We didn't know exactly where they'd come down in this issue, but now we're kind of seeing it. I guess they have to hold hard to the line that they're standing in now. This could get much more bloody, I suppose, from what we're seeing even now with the 51 deaths.
Oh, it certainly could. We have to remember, and I really encourage your viewers to understand this, that freedom, American style or Western style, is not what we are seeing in the Islamic world in these times. The Islamic world does not know from those freedoms. Freedom doesn't just mean free elections. And what we have seen in the Arab Spring, the so-called Arab Spring or the pro-democracy movement, all that we have seen really is a demand for free elections so that they can put in the leadership that they want. But it's a very immature kind of request or demand for freedom. In a country like the United States, it took many years until that philosophy of tolerance and real freedom became ingrained in the people. And yes, the founding fathers had it. People like Benjamin Franklin were preaching real freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. They were preaching this a long time ago. But it took many years, many decades, until the United States started to give true freedom and true tolerance to all of its people. But now it's ingrained in the American psyche. But however, in the Islamic world, you don't have that. In the Islamic world, let's give an example. A poll was taken 2 years ago in Egypt in which they found that the Egyptians believe, and this is 80% of Egyptians believe, that a Muslim who changes his religion should be killed. And that a shoplifter who's convicted of a misdemeanor of shoplifting should have his hands cut off. Now, these are basic Islamic beliefs.
And the definitions are certainly different. Yeah.
It's very different from the American concept of freedom.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about it's speculative, I know, but what you think Israel might be playing in this role in the future, if at all, because, hey, you had the peace agreement with Egypt and all the rest. We're talking with David Rubin, the former mayor of the Israeli settlement in Shiloh, as well as author of several books, and we'll continue with our discussion in just a couple minutes here on Focus Today. Welcome back to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, and great to have our guest David Rubin with us once again. He's been with us before. He's a political expert on U.S.-Israeli relations, a former mayor of the Israeli settlement in Shiloh, and also he's written several books that we can get into, of course. I appreciate the insight that you've had so far. I'd like you to, and I realize it's speculation, but Israel has had the peace agreement with Egypt. I think some people wondered what's going to happen when Morsi takes the reins. We haven't heard too much about how that's been jeopardized or not. And now the military in control and so much upheaval there. How do you see, what is the talk among those who are your colleagues in Israel and all the rest? Is there still a peace agreement between Israel and Egypt?
On paper, there is. The peace treaty has not been abrogated by the Egyptian side, and obviously there are reasons for that. The Egyptian government, the Egyptian military, receives almost $2 billion a year in aid from the United States government. Which of course, in my opinion, is a bit absurd right now at this point. You have to understand the context when it was started was when the peace treaty was signed between Egypt and Israel. The government at that time, the government of Jimmy Carter, wanted to encourage the peace treaty, wanted to encourage the Egyptians. And so they decided, okay, they're giving financial aid to Israel, so the American government will give financial aid to Egypt as well. It's continued. Now, the situation is different now, though. During the time of Mubarak, there was stability in Egypt. Yes, he was a dictator. Yes, he wasn't really elected. But he provided stability for about 30 years in Egypt. In the past 3 years or so, we've had total chaos in Egypt. We've had demonstrations to rioting, to rapes in the streets, during every demonstration. I should point out there are about 100 rapes. This has been going on for a few years now, and there is no stability in Egypt. The economy is in a real mess. Over in Syria, we have a civil war going on. There's a civil war between the Shiite Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. This instability in the Middle East is what concerns us. We in Israel are not looking necessarily for free elections in the Islamic world. The free elections haven't provided anything, anything of real value for any of these nations. What it has provided is instability, economic madness, and just fueled the anger of Islamic fundamentalism and the violence of Muslim fundamentalism, and that's something that we have to be very concerned about in Israel. And what we would prefer having is stability on our borders, not this chaos going on today.
Yeah, and I realize this next question is speculative, but from what you know how the Israeli government operates, what is the mode that they are in right now? I mean, I imagine it's some sort of a heightened awareness within the military, as if there's ever a time in Israel when it's not very heightened. But are there special things that you think are being implemented right now?
Well, there certainly is a state of alert. Yes, we are in an ongoing state of war. We always have to be in a state of alert. But the situation right now is very much a hands-off, wait and see approach, and I think that's really what's needed right now for the Israeli military to be on high alert. But for the Israeli military to be watching things very, very carefully, so that we don't have any chaos and any major conflict to break out. But if somehow conflict breaks out, we have to be prepared for it.
Okay, you have mentioned that the elections, of course, were done in as democratically free an environment as Egypt could have, and I think some people have said, Morsi was the one, they should have used some process to get rid of him rather than throw him out right there, but I know that there are others who have concerns about what his agenda was. Why do you think that Americans should be concerned with the Muslim Brotherhood in a leadership role in Egypt?
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is a very problematic organization. You have to remember the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928. It is the longest and most solid organizationally of all the Islamic organizations in the Middle East, but it is also one of the most radical. They have a core belief that calls for the destruction of Judeo-Christian civilization from within. They don't believe in freedom. They believe in using freedom to take over. They believe in Islamic world domination. That is something that the world should be very concerned about. Now, you may ask, well, why should Americans be concerned being so far away? Well, the reality is that the Middle East is important. The Middle East has a lot of oil. The Middle East has a lot of wealth from that oil. The Middle East is the convergence of 3 different continents. It's a very strategic place. So if the United States understands that, and I know that every American administration has understood that, then Americans as a whole need to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood, being so contrary to American civilization, being so contrary to the philosophy of tolerance, and wanting very clearly and stating very clearly that their long-term goal is domination, world domination, I think they need to be recognized as a threat to the United States, as a threat to the free world, and they are a threat to the free world that's no less than Nazism in its early stages or communism in its early stages ever was.
All right, I want to mention to our listeners and viewers that David Rubin is our guest, former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, written several books, and we go to him about the insight that he has on what's happening in the Middle East. We're talking, of course, about Egypt specifically now. President Obama has been, if nothing else, giving a little bit mixed signals in some of the statements he's made. He's not come out really strong, pro or con, on any of the issues, it seems, in Egypt at this point. What would you suggest the leader in his position should be doing right now? Do you have any suggestions or things that you think Israel would like to be seeing President Obama doing or not doing?
Well, I think that President Obama and the American administration would be strongly advised to just have a hands-off philosophy. I think that the situation right now where the United States has gotten on board with the Islamic rebels in Syria, I think that's a big mistake. I don't think that supporting people who are aligned with Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood is a good idea. I don't think it's good for American interests, and I just don't see why invest all that money towards it. Secondly, in Egypt, we have a situation where the Muslim Brotherhood is fighting against a military coup. I think that the United States should just have a hands-off policy and just focus on healing the American economy. I think that's more important. And I don't think it's going to help American interests in the Middle East to be jumping on board with either the military in Egypt or jumping on board with the Islamic fundamentalists. I think, in general, a good American policy in the Middle East right now would be just have hands-off policy. Let the different Islamic nations work it out between themselves. If it leads to civil war, so it leads to civil war. That's there's not much that the Americans can do about that. There's not much that the West can do about it, and it certainly isn't much that Israel can do about that.
We've only got about a minute left. I guess from what you've been saying, it sounds as if you're not surprised to see this backlash from the Muslim Brotherhood. It was something you could very well have expected in this case.
Absolutely. Look, I've written about this in my book, The Islamic Tsunami. It's all clear. I wrote about it in my next book, Peace for Peace, Israel and New Middle East. The Islamic world is in a constant state of flux, and when they're going through a state of flux, they're going through violence and violent upheaval. It's not like in the West, where we wait 4 years and then elect new leaders, even if we don't like the leaders during those 4 years. The Islamic world doesn't work like that. It's a difference between civilizations, a fundamental difference between civilizations.
And do you think what's going to happen there in the next, let's say, month or so could very well determine the future course for a large part of the Middle East?
Well, it could, but I obviously Egypt being a large nation, being the most populous of all the nations in the Middle East, it could have influence. But at the same time, I think that what we're seeing is just a continuation of a pattern. It's just upheaval between the Islamic fundamentalists and those who are opposed to them. State of poverty in the Islamic world, and the inability of any countries that aren't oil-rich countries to heal their economies. It's an ongoing problem that I think is going to continue.
All right, David Rubin, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
We'll be checking in with you, I'm sure, in the future as well. David Rubin with us on Focus today. Thanks again.